I never thought a simple letter could carry so much weight. But the day I helped Mrs. Parker write one, I realized, sometimes, words can be heavier than silence. She was 8, fragile, quiet, and always staring out of the hospice window, as if waiting for someone who never came. I was just the volunteer assigned to her room, the one who brought her tea and asked if she needed anything. But that afternoon, she looked up and said softly, "Could you help me write something? My hands don't work the way they used to." I smiled and handed her the pen. "Of course, who's it for?" Her eyes filled before she even answered. "My son." She took a deep breath and whispered, "He stopped talking to me 20 years ago, and it was my fault." That was the first time I saw her cry, not from pain, but from regret that had aged with her. She told me she'd once been a strict mother, too strict maybe, and that one night, her anger had broken something that could never be fixed. I watched as she dictated every word slowly, carefully, as if afraid they might be her last. "Dear Michael," she began, "if you're reading this, I want you to know I was wrong." Her voice trembled. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was only protecting my pride." I kept writing. Her memories spilled out like rain. Moments of shouting, words she wished she could take back, birthdays she missed, phone calls she never returned. By the end, the letter was tear-stained and unfinished. She looked at it for a long time and whispered, "Do you think he'll forgive me?" I didn't know what to say. How could I promise forgiveness to someone who had carried guilt longer than I'd been alive? So I said, the only thing that felt true, "I think he'll finally understand." That night, I sealed the letter myself. I planned to mail it the next morning, but by sunrise, she was gone. The next morning felt unusually still. Her bed was empty. The air carried that strange silence that follows after someone has quietly left this world. On the bedside table lay the envelope, the one we never got to send. It had her shaky handwriting on it. "To my son, Michael Parker." I stood there for a long moment, staring at it, feeling the weight of it, as if all her years of regret were sealed inside. I didn't have the heart to leave it there, so I took it. That evening, as the hospice lights dimmed, I sat in my car, the letter resting on the passenger seat. I typed his name into my phone, Michael Parker, San Diego. There were too many results, too many Michaels. I almost gave up, until one profile caught my eye. A small-town carpenter with tired eyes and a faint resemblance to her. I found his workshop address the next morning. It was 2 hours away. On the drive there, I kept hearing her voice, that trembling, soft whisper. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" When I finally reached his shop, he was standing outside, sanding a piece of wood. His hands were rough, steady, the kind of hands that build and rebuild. I introduced myself quietly. "Hi, I used to care for your mother." His face changed. His grip tightened on the wood. He didn't say a word for a long time. Finally, he sighed. "She's gone, isn't she?" I nodded. I handed him the envelope. "She wrote this for you." He stared at it but didn't take it. "She wrote to me before," he said bitterly. "Every Christmas, every birthday. I never opened a single one." The silence between us felt heavy. I placed the letter on his workbench. Maybe this one's different. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard the faint tear of paper behind me. He had opened it. I didn't turn around, but I heard his breathing shift, the kind that comes before tears. Then his voice broke the silence. She remembered the night I left." He paused. "She wrote, I wasn't angry that you left. I was angry because you were right." He sat down slowly, pressing the paper against his chest. I saw the kind of grief that doesn't come from loss, but from realization. He looked up at me, eyes red. "She really thought I'd forgive her." I smiled faintly. "She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted you to know she never stopped loving you." He covered his face with his hands, and for a long time, we both said nothing. Outside, the light shifted soft, golden, like the kind that follows a storm. He finally whispered, almost to himself, "I wish I'd read the others." And I said softly, "Then maybe you should start with this one." 3 days later, Michael called me. His voice was quiet, hesitant, the kind of tone people use when they're still trying to make peace with the past. "I read it," he said. "Every word." There was a pause. "Would you come with me? I want to see her." So that morning, we drove together to the small cemetery behind St. Mary's Church, the same place Mrs. Parker had once mentioned as the spot under the oak tree. The ground was still damp from last night's rain. The air smelled of earth and memory. Michael carried a small bunch of white lilies, trembling slightly in his calloused hands. We found her grave, a simple stone, no fancy just her name, and beneath it, a mother, waiting. He stood there for a long time, eyes fixed on that single word, waiting. "I never called her back," he whispered. "She left voicemails every year, saying she missed me, that she'd changed. I'd delete them before they finished. I said nothing. Some silences aren't meant to be filled. He knelt down, brushed the leaves away, and placed the lilies beside the stone. Then, slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the letter. The paper was worn now, edges soft, the ink slightly smudged from tears. He unfolded it one last time and began to read out loud, his voice trembling as if each word was cutting through 2 decades of distance. "If you're reading this, I want you to know, I never stopped being proud of you." He stopped. His breathing broke. "I thought love was about control. I didn't know it was about letting go." His tears fell silently onto the paper. Then, something caught my eye. A small, sealed envelope tucked beneath the flowers that hospice staff had placed earlier. It was addressed to me. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note, written in her shaky handwriting. "If he ever comes, tell him I forgave myself, and tell him I love the man he became, even if I never got to see it." I handed the note to Michael. He read it slowly, his lips trembling, his eyes glistening in disbelief. He looked up at the sky, voice breaking. "She forgave herself." I nodded. "Yes, because she finally believed you would, too." The wind picked up gently, carrying the scent of the lilies. Somewhere above, sunlight broke through the clouds, landing softly on her name carved in stone. Michael placed his hand over it and whispered, almost like a prayer, "I forgive you, Mom." And for the first time since I'd met him, he smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because he'd finally let it go. It had been a week since we visited Mrs. Parker's grave. I thought the story had ended there, a mother's apology finally reaching her son. But stories like hers, they never end where you expect. When I returned to the hospice to drop off my volunteer badge, one of the nurses stopped me. "Oh, you were Mrs. Parker's helper, right?" she said. "We found something in her drawer. She said you'd know what to do with it." She handed me a small, leather-bound notebook, the cover worn, corners frayed, a diary. I hesitated before opening it, but the first line stopped me cold. "If someone finds this after I'm gone, give it to my son, only if he forgives me." I held the diary to my chest, knowing exactly where it belonged. The next morning, I drove back to Michael's workshop. He was sitting outside, carving a small wooden box. His eyes were tired but softer now, as if the anger had finally melted into something gentler. I handed him the diary. He looked confused. "She kept a journal." I nodded. "She started writing it long before the letter, maybe hoping one day you'd read her heart, not just her words." He turned the first page. His hands trembled as he began to read. "Today I saw a boy at the park who looked like Michael. For a second, I thought he turned and smiled at me. I waved. He didn't wave back. Maybe he wasn't mine, or maybe I stopped being his mother a long time ago." His voice cracked. He kept reading. "I pray every night that he's safe, that he's eating well, that someone out there loves him better than I did." Tears spilled freely down his cheeks now. Then he reached the final page, a page that seemed newer, written not long before she passed. "If I never see you again, my son, know this: I left this world loving you more than I ever knew how to show. And if forgiveness never comes, I'll still wait for you under the oak tree." Michael closed the diary and pressed it against his heart. For a long while, he didn't speak. He just sat there, holding that small piece of his mother's soul. Finally, he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I used to think she ruined my childhood, but maybe she was just broken, too." I smiled faintly, tears in my eyes. But she tried to fix it, even when she knew she wouldn't see the ending." He placed the diary inside the wooden box he'd been carving. On the lid, he etched the words slowly, carefully. "For Mom," the letter I finally read. As I turned to leave, the late afternoon sun spilled through the trees, lighting up the tiny carvings on the box. And in that moment, I realized, forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about freeing the heart that still remembers.